You used to hearing that down south, aren't you? At the outdated drive-thru. Well, great day in the morning. We're starting a whole nother drive-thru near Philadelphia in Pennsylvania. It's just a bit outside of town where the kids all play with the sticks. All the flavors of Philly you want in an easy drive-thru situation. Ready for some good action? In the mouth? Try our outdated cheesesteak. It's so big, even the blue meanie said, "Oh man, I gotta share this. I can't eat all this." That way you know it's good. So much cheese, so much Velvivo just for you. How about our brand new outdated jumbo salt pretzel? Big enough to be a turnbuckle pad, but salty enough to make you want to check yourself for the pressure. Don't get the pressure. Doughy enough that you'll beg not to chew for a while. Buy one, feed a family of 6. We're nothing if not full of value. Of course, we wouldn't be as famous as we are without our outdated drinks. We got ECW Red Pop. You can guess what makes it red. We got our original sports bar orange soda. Hey, you clown guys. And we have our specialty, our birch beer, a favorite of Stevie Wonderful. We've been in business and outdated since 1964. You won't get through our drive-thru fast. It's the sign right there that says good food takes time to prepare. So stop cussing and come out the outdated drive-thru, a division of the outdated wrestling hour. Yeah, you're right. Welcome back, y'all. My name is Bob Smith. I am the current host of the Outdated Wrestling Hour. Many decades ago, I worked for Pro Wrestling Illustrated magazine, and we're going to go back many decades today. Our guest is someone I haven't spoken with since 1991. I am not kidding. His name is Joel Goodhart, and I know you remember this fellow. He was the impresario and mastermind behind the beloved East Coast Action Federation, the Tri-State Wrestling Alliance. And when I say action, TWA was nothing but action. Based out of Philadelphia, cards around that region, unforgettable stars coming to an area that was really desperate for them at that point. He's got a lot of memories, a lot of good memories, a lot of bad memories, and a lot of things we're going to discuss. I'm really looking forward to this. The interview is in the bag, so I will say this is going to be one of the few episodes that we do that has the E rating. Yeah, I try not to do that, but once in a while, you let one slip, so we get the E rating this time. Keep the kiddies away from the radio, you know what I'm saying? But anyway, we're going to have some fun. Get your usual drink, get your snack, get your pork rinds, get your Kool-Aid. We're going to have some fun with Joel Goodhart. He's got a really big event coming up next year, and the plans are already well underway. And we'll tell you how you can get involved with this ASAP. Enough of my yakking. Here's a quick ad, and then right to our festivities with Joel Goodhart. Be right back. Well, it's sort of kind of been in the news lately. We want you to know all about it. Recently, the Outdated Wrestling Hour podcast with Bob Smith has joined the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. I'm really glad to be part of this team, and it is a team, and you can hear the podcast virtually anywhere the podcasts are offered. Such great shows like the Wrestling Memory Grenade, Regional Wrestling, is the Wrestling Stoop with Bob Rube. Gene Jackson's another great host. You can hear him on the Retro Wrestling Review, which looks back at the classic days of the USWA, and the brand new show, Dangerous Conversations with Doug Gilbert, featuring, well, Doug Gilbert, one of the great Memphis wrestlers of all time. Also on the WrestleCopia Podcast Network, Dave Dynasty and his long-standing hit podcast, Wrestling Nostalgia, featuring an A-list bunch of professional wrestlers you never know who you're going to hear speaking with Dave. And of course, a serious bent on the WWA, and I love that. There's DG's Pure Wrestling Academy. Dan Giannetti travels back in time to discuss the history of pro wrestling in Japan through the decades, not just recently. You're going to want to check out that show. Monday Warfare, Raw versus Nitro, looks at, well, the classic Monday Night Wrestling Wars. The Other Ship podcast describes itself as a pop culture podcast with a pro wrestling lean. Join a rotating group of co-hosts as they talk movies, sports, TV, food, and of course, wrestling. How can you beat that? And they got a whole mess of great special guests, too. Also on the WrestleCopia Podcast Network, you're going to want to check out The Captain's Corner, GrappleCon, TR Shocks the World, WCNN News, and a whole lot more. You'll never know what you're going to hear on the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. Well, how do you find all this stuff, right? Simple. Start out by just logging on to WrestleCopia.com and let them take you on that ride, baby. To pro wrestling old and new. Guys, I've been talking to Joel Goodhart for about 10 minutes. He's here. How you doing, Joel?
Oh, Bob, I'm doing fine, man. I haven't seen you since 1991.
Yeah, I can't believe that's the year. I mean, that boggles my mind. I was a regular I think I was at all your shows. I think if I missed one, that's the only one I missed. I can't recall very many that I missed.
Yeah, you were at all the big shows, okay? And you were sitting, we put you ringside, and we even announced you from the ring, and people booed the hell out of you. It was good. I enjoyed it.
Well, they should. They should have at that point. I will say this. One time, guys, Joel had got me my press pass for one of the big cards. I think it was one of the Sheik Abdullah shows.
Okay.
And I get a phone call from Joe Goodhart. I go, Joe, what do you need? He goes, well, Bob, if you're coming to the show, I need you to wear a tuxedo. And I'm thinking, what the fuck is he talking about, right? I go, well, what are you talking about? He goes, well, listen, I want to look. This is a special show. I brought talent in from all over the country. Let's do it right. Let's do it major league. And you know what? When you said that, I went, yeah, I get it. So I went and rented a tux, and I showed up. Now, here's the funniest part about all this, okay? I don't even think you know this story. I am going backstage, probably heading for the men's room or something before I went back to sit down, and I'm talking to Dory Funk Jr.
Mm-hmm.
He's there for whatever reason. I don't think he was on the show. But I feel a hand on my shoulder, and I turn around, and this graying man with steely eyes looks at me and goes, Joel, what time is bell? It was the Sheik. He thought I was you. You know, we used to have a similar kind of look, longish hair. We both had a beard. We both were, stocky. And I go, well, wait a minute. No, I'm not Joel. He said, I know where Joel is. I'll go find him. And I went to look for you. I never did find you, but I'm sure he found you eventually. But
he found me. Well,
so I can say I actually talked to the Sheik in a business profession. He thought I was you.
Well, here's a great story, okay? Talk about the Sheik. Abby, obviously, I was close with Abby. I had Abby on a lot of the cards. And I happened to say, Abby, one day, I want to have a match with you and the Sheik. Can you give me Sheik's number? And Abby said, you know what? I'll have Sheik call you. I said, fine. 2 days later, I get a phone call, and it was Sheik. All right. Now, how many promoters will tell you that Sheik would call you to get a job? Okay.
Right.
So he calls me up and he tells me that Abdul, he said you wanted to hook me up. I said, I want to have a match with the two of you. He says, great. I know about your reputation. That's what he said to me. I know about your reputation. You put on a good show. I'll come in from Detroit. We talked our numbers. And I said, fine, I'm going to start promoting the show. He said, that's okay. So I started promoting it. And then I find out he doesn't fly because I called him up and said, I got to get you some airfare. What are you flying on? He doesn't fly. He says to me, will you reimburse me for the gas? I said, sure, I'll reimburse you for the gas. He comes in from Detroit to the show. He doesn't drive. So his driver was Sabu, who's his nephew. Okay? Sabu had not worked on the East Coast, just worked in the Detroit area.
Right.
So he came and I said, look, while you're here, we have a battle royal. Get participating in the battle royal. It's on video. If you go to YouTube, he literally runs down the aisle, literally flies into the ring. Okay? And I mean, people didn't realize that this was star of the future, but we had Sabu first.
Right, you did. Yeah.
Yep.
And, in 91, I saw him in Memphis with Rob Van Dam. Wasn't even wrestling by that name at that point. And together, I think they were making $50 a show working for the Jarretts. So you really got them at the cusp of them starting out. Both of them.
It's amazing. I think back now. First of all, look, everybody in the world who knows this sport knows I overpaid. Everybody knows that.
Well,
when I brought people in, I was a professional. They were a professional. I asked them what their number was, and I said, here's the deal. I agreed to the number. You just better give me the match of your life. Well, here we are 33 years later, and I'm on a podcast talking about the matches I had 33 years ago.
Right.
Okay? There are very few promoters that can talk about it because, quite frankly, their matches are no big deal.
But here's the thing about what you did with the Tri-State Wrestling Alliance, and let's not understress this. You, of all the people in our district in the East Coast, looked around and said, and you watched wrestling, you were watching WWE, everybody else was, everybody was going, yeah, it's homogenized, there's no action, it's not the wrestling I remember. We'd rather see Memphis, we'd rather see this, we'd rather see Japan. You heard that. You heard them saying this. Mm-hmm. And you brought all of those flavors into Philadelphia.
Well, the premise that I had was that the Tri-State Wrestling Alliance would take the best of Memphis, the best of Florida, the best of Georgia, the best of Pacific Northwest, the best of the world class, and put it together. Mm-hmm. Okay? The super shows that I put together, in hindsight, I could have done a whole lot less with each show and made more money.
Right.
And there were promotions all over the East Coast that survived me, and they did it right. They would have one main event match, and they have a bunch of local talent. I used to have at those supercards 6 main events.
Right.
Okay. And the 6 main events, some of them were matches. I was a mark when it came to some of this stuff. I had one match that you may remember. I had a match with Adrian Street against Boogie Woogie Jimmy Valiant.
Mm-hmm.
That was a match that did not sell me one ticket.
Right.
It was the 3rd match on the card. I flew in Adrian and Miss Linda plus Jimmy Valiant. So it was 3 flights, 2 hotel rooms, and this was the 3rd match on the card. And I only wanted to see Adrian Street. I never saw him live. I saw him on video. Mm-hmm. And these guys, Jimmy Valiant and Adrian Street, burned up Georgia for 2 years. Anyway, long story short, I get them to come up. They're really past their prime, obviously, no question. They're in the back. Best line I ever heard. Jimmy Valiant says to Adrian Street, just don't put me in a hold I can't get out of. Okay. All right. They come out. Jimmy Valiant comes out first. He does his New York thing. Then Adrian Street comes out, and he comes out with Miss Linda and does his record. And they do a match, and the match sucked. Okay, the match sucked, but I got to watch what I wanted to watch. Okay?
Right.
I will tell you that most of the matches that I had were matches I wanted to see as a fan.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and I think what made the card was so excellent was the fact that the show was what I wanted to see. I wanted blood and guts. I wanted stuff outside the ring. I don't know how you have a professional wrestling match and keep it within the ring. I don't know how you do it. Okay?
Right.
So if you remember, we had a lot of Pins County were in the building match. We had all kinds of stuff. I think back now, there's no way that promotion that I had would survive today because of television, because of cable, because of the sheets, because of the podcast, because it wouldn't. Back then, I had no TV, I had no internet, and I was drawing 2,000 people to a show at the Civic Center.
Yeah.
Okay, and they were paying top dollar for those tickets. I mean, it was just phenomenal.
You had bus trips coming in from all over the East Coast, New York, Long Island, every place else.
All over.
Maine, I heard Maine was coming down.
Yeah, John Arezzi ran a bus trip from New York all the time. Mike Lano used to come in from California. He used to fly in, okay, just for the show. Like I said, it only worked because we didn't have all this interference.
Right.
Okay, whatever happens today in Queens is known everywhere in the world in about 30 seconds.
Right.
Okay. So wrestling used to work. I mean, when we used to do tours of Memphis, we used to come in and we go to Jackson, Tennessee. Then we would go to Nashville for the Saturday night show. And the match that you saw on Saturday night in Nashville was the show that they had at the Mid-South Coliseum that week. Okay. Then we would go back to Mid-South on Monday night. That used to run every week. Okay. And there's a promotion that was running every week, but they used television. They had the local TV. Plus Jerry Lawler obviously had the whole place rocking. And it's weird because I don't keep in touch, but I'm a member of the Cauliflower Alley Club, and I go out there, and Lawler's always out there. And I get to meet a lot of these guys, and they all knew of my promotion. I'll never forget, it's been 3 years since I've been out there. Baron von Raschke was there with his wife, and Baron comes up to me, and I had never met him before, and he says to me, "You're Joel Goodhart, right?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "Why didn't you ever use me on your cards?" Okay. And I said, "You never called me." We kidded a little bit. I think we had, in hindsight, without sounding self-serving, some of the best talent, the best matches, when you could have in the dressing room Terry Funk, Jerry Lawler, Eddie Gilbert, Austin Idol, Buddy Landell. Then on top of that, you've got my local guys, which, to be honest, the local guys were better than the talent. The talent knew their job was to have their name on the ticket. But when you had DC Drake, the late Larry Winters, Tony Stetson, Johnny Hotbody, Jimmy Janetti, Glenn Osborne, I can go down the list.
Sure.
It was incredible. And those guys worked their asses off.
They did.
Yep. And to this day, I tell some of these guys, they bled for me.
Literally.
These guys bled for me. So here's what's going on. And I know you've heard some buzz about what's happening. I decided, and there's a long story, I don't know how long you want to get, but I came up with an idea that TWA, we're going to have one more show. And I'm calling it One and Done. I always market it with something. So I'm calling it One and Done because I'm going to do one more show. It's going to be my last show. It's not going to be where we're starting up the TWA again and have quarterly meetings and quarterly matches. It's a one and done. So what I'm doing, it's going to be on Saturday, May 3rd. And Bob, you better mark that date down because you better get in the car and drive. Just come on down.
Okay.
Because you're going to see some history be made. I'll just tell you that. Now, one of the things that I think is pretty cool, we're renting out the 2300 Arena, which right now, think about this one. The TWA started at Temple University's McGonigal Hall. That was torn down. Then we went to the Philadelphia Civic Center. That was torn down. We wrestled some matches at the Philadelphia Sports Bar. That doesn't exist anymore. So it's not like I'm holding a match in an old building.
Right.
So I didn't want to do it in a school. So anyway, the 2300 Arena is the arena that everybody knows about. And that's where the ECW really came to be. And everybody knows, even though Todd is God, the reality is that I created God. Okay. So what I'm doing, you'll love this one, Bob. I have a list, so I won't forget anybody. But this is a list of the TWA talent that is going to be attending the May 3rd matches. Okay, we've got the commitment. And this is specific or somewhat alphabetical. Donnie Allen is committed to being there. Donnie Allen was the handler for DC Drake, okay, and he was on just about every one of my shows. Donnie also was trained at Ringmasters Wrestling School, so Donnie is going to be in attendance on May 3rd. Bob Ortiz, who was the ring announcer for ECW, okay, was also a ring announcer for me at the Bar Wars shows.
Right.
And quite frankly, him and his wife, Lex, they were at all my shows on the front row. They attended my shows. Anyway, he's going to be our ring announcer for the night, and he'll be wearing a tux. Okay. Then we're going to have a wrestler that's local. Bob, I don't know if you know who he is. Breaker Morant.
Yes, I do know who he is. Mm-hmm.
Breaker is a guy, and Breaker is going to be in the building. I've always, I saw Breaker in action. Breaker to me was the local DC Drake, the new DC Drake. He was ready. I love the way he performs. I love the way he wrestles. So Breaker Morant is going to be, and he wrestled for the TWA in the latter portion of the TWA. Mike Bruno is going to be there. Now, Mike Bruno was taught at Ringmasters. If he was the tag partner to Tony Stetson, okay, and Mike is in the area, and quite frankly, Mike's still he could still wrestle today. Okay, these guys, I'm not having them wrestle, but Mike Bruno, if he wanted to, he could really wrestle. Cujo the Hellhound. I don't know if you know Cujo, but Cujo wrestled in the latter part of TWA, and he's going to be in attendance. DC Drake, who is my god. DC Drake and Larry Winters, and Larry obviously passed away. DC Drake was on every one of my cards. Okay, and the deal that I had with DC and with Larry Winters and Tony and all those guys was you're on my card. Unless you get booked elsewhere and you can make more money, you're on my card. All right, DC Drake, I actually got to see him again a year or two ago. He was being inducted into the Northeast Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame. And he had done so much work for me, I decided I wanted to go see it in Rhode Island. So I have a professional driver that takes me around because I don't drive anymore. And she took me up. It took us 5.5 hours to get there. I got there about 10 minutes before the show started. DC got up and received his award. He gave me some accolades from the stage. I waited till the thing was over, and then we drove back. So I went 13 hours in a car. I'm driving up and back to go see DC Drake. But DC is coming down from Rhode Island for our show in May 3rd.
And let me just interject one thing about DC Drake. Number one, in my mind's eye, the last scary heel. The last guy who could really scare the fans. And number two, I think the precursor to the hardcore movement and the risk-taking movement that came later. Everybody remembers him hanging onto a balcony and falling to a gym floor. And that was long before it was hip. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
So DC is probably a little underrated in that regard in establishing the East Coast style that became popular later on. Do you agree with that?
No question. He did it. He and Larry combined. Then the second time they met at the Temple University, if you remember, they wrestled upstairs into the press box, and Larry Winters was actually hanging out of it. And, you know, you hear about ECW, you see some of these videos of people jumping off of this and that. We did it 35 years ago.
No, that's true. I was there for a lot of this stuff because it's like, yeah, people, you know what the problem was? It wasn't televised.
Well, we didn't have and to be honest, we didn't videotape a lot of this stuff.
Right.
Okay, we have some of it. In YouTube, you can see some of our matches, but you can't see them all. Anyway, let me keep going on the list here.
Go ahead.
Yeah, John Finnegan, who was our head referee for TWA, who was the referee in ECW and is obviously still refereeing. He's going to be in attendance on May 3rd. Johnny Hotbody, who was unbelievable. God, I love him. He lives in Atlantic City. He's not in the best of health. He'll get there. I'm making sure of it. He will be there on May 3rd. If you ever need him on your podcast, he's great to have on a podcast. He really is.
I imagine. Yeah.
But Johnny Hotbody has agreed to be there on May 3rd. Rich Engling, I think you know Rich. Rich was one of my original referees. Rich is, I think, vice president with the Cauliflower Alley Club. So I keep in touch with him. A year or so ago, he actually contacted me. He wanted to see if I'd be active or we willing to go on the board of Cauliflower Alley Club. Anyway, long story short, Rich Engling is going to be in attendance on May 3rd. Jimmy Giannetti, one of the guys trained at Ringmasters Wrestling School, he's coming up from Florida. Now, fortunately, his father still lives up this way, and so he's coming up to see his father and coming up to do the show as well. But he'll be there for the entire show. Mike Keener, who's one of the referees that worked in our latter part of TWA, he's going to be in attendance. Blue Meanie.
Oh, boy.
Okay, those of you, some people know Blue Meanie. Blue Meanie wrestled for the latter part of the TWA, but Blue Meanie is the senior of all seniors. When we had the Squared Circle fan club, me and Carmel and Paul, when we had the Squared Circle fan club and we did our trips to Memphis, well, Blue Meanie, Brian, came and he was on our bus trips as a kid going to Memphis. All right, so we got to know him before he was ever Blue Meanie, before he ever even thought about being in the ECW and creating what he has done. Jim Molyneux, who was who was one of our referees, he'll be in attendance, and of course he was a big he was one of the original referees for ECW, but he'll be in attendance with us as well. And some of the guys, the referees, I think some of them are actually going to referee some matches. We'll be able to put those guys to work. Glenn Osborne. If you know Glenn, Glenn is going to be in attendance. I've known Glenn. Glenn's walking with a cane now. He's got his limitations, but he was just such a great guy way back when. Okay, and he lives in the area in Westchester, and we're looking forward to seeing him. Bay Ragney, who became Chubby Dudley. Okay, he'll be in attendance. Now, Bay is interesting. Bay was at Ringmasters Wrestling School for 2 years. We couldn't get him to do a flip. And we finally got him to do a flip after 2 years, and we finally had him booked for his first match, which is on the card that never happened. Okay, so he never technically wrestled for the TWA, but he's got history, and he's going to be there as well. And he's coming in from Nashville, Tennessee.
Right.
The key to this one, the people are coming in from everywhere. Okay, and I'm telling you, when people hear this podcast, if you want to come to a great show, just like we used to have people coming with buses from New York and with people flying in from California, we're going to hopefully have that again. Now, another original, a true original from Ringmasters Wrestling School was Sandman. All right, and Sandman now lives back in the area. And I called Sandman. We finally got it hooked up. Sandman will be there on May 3rd. Okay. And Sandman, I mean, I still say this. Sandman, when Larry Winters created Sandman at Ringmasters, we actually had him as a beach bum. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
Then when he went to ECW, they gave him the gimmick of doing what he did. I'm convinced, and I've said this to people, I'll say it again. I'm convinced that Stone Cold Steve Austin's gimmick was Sandman's gimmick. Drinking of the beer, being a bad guy, and Sandman started with Ringmasters. So if he didn't start with Ringmasters, he never would have gotten to ECW, and you wouldn't have had a Stone Cold Steve Austin. Okay, I just to believe that. Tony Stetson is going to be there. Tony, God bless him, lives in the area. Loved the way he used to work with Johnny Hotbody. The feud that we had between Tony Stetson and Johnny Hotbody was awesome. We had the City of Brotherly Hate match, which was great at Temple University. When we had DC Drake and Larry Winters, I mean, these were main event matches. And unfortunately, they were the younger talent. They were the local talent. So they weren't the names. But oh my God, these guys, look, every time I had them on a card, one thing these guys knew was they were on every show. I have every show, the local shows, the school shows, the big main events. You're on the card. If you can make it, be there. And of course, they got paid well. What I find amazing today, 34 years later, is a lot of the local talent today doesn't get paid what I paid those guys. It's unbelievable how these guys are doing what they do for $15, $25, $10. It's just incredible to me. I'm going to go a little bit further. We've got Jay Soley is going to be with us. Steve Truitt, who used to be Stevie Wonderful with ECW, he's going to be with us. Okay.
I love that guy. He's great.
Okay. And I talk to him all the time. He's going to be in attendance. We have a commitment from Larry Winter's son for him to be there. All right. And the reason I'm bringing him up for a second is this all started when Bay Ragney, Chubby Dudley, started a campaign. And if you're on Facebook, you'll see it. He came up with an idea independent of me. He came up with an idea that he wanted to have a banner at the ECW arena. And we haven't gotten the history hasn't talked about the TWA because we really haven't marketed it. But the reality is we created everything. Everything started with the Tri-State Wrestling Alliance. So he came up with an idea that he wants to have one banner drop, and on the banner would be DC Drake, the late Larry Winters, Johnny Hotbody and Tony Stetson, and Joel Goodhart as the 5 icons of Philadelphia wrestling. All right? And we need to get 1,000 signatures in order to get on to have the banner. And we're at 547, I think was our last count. So, Bob, when this is all done, I'm going to send you a link to get you to sign up on the petition. And if you can pass that out and just put it on your website, whatever, we'll get more people to sign up.
I will definitely do that.
You got it. So anyway, and Larry Winter's son or kids, we know one son committed to coming. We'll see if we can get more. We have a wrestler by the name of Chris Wilde. Okay. Chris Wilde used to have matches with that Breaker Morant that I talked about earlier. And Chris Wilde and Breaker Morant used to tear it up. They were the new DC Drake and Larry Winters. Okay, that's what they were. They were the new Tony Stetson, Johnny Hotbody. They were phenomenal. And I don't know if we're going to get them in a match or not get them in a match, but I will tell you, those two guys today, for people who want to see good, old-fashioned wrestling, those guys do it. They do it. So I'm glad that, and you have Chris in the building and have Breaker in the building. Then I'm also going to have Joe Zanoli. If you know Joe, well, you used to sit next to Joe because Joe used to be one of the referees and go outside. But Joe was, with me, was one of our local referees. So we've got all the referees that I had coming. They're all around and they're kicking and they're going to be there. Those are the names of the people that have committed to being at that show on May 3rd. Okay. What's going to happen on May 3rd, we're going to have 8 matches. Okay, I'm not giving you out the matches yet. We're going to drip it out. We'll let people to know. Those guys that I just mentioned, I'm going to say it. Most of them can't wrestle. Now, at this point, they can't do it. Okay, and everybody DC Drake had triple bypass surgery. I've had my issues. I'm never going to get in the ring again. So it's reality that this is a show. We need to do it because, quite frankly, one and done. We want to get everybody back together. I had to make you'll love this one. When I called every one of these guys, when I finally found them, I committed to their spouses. No bumps. Okay, we're not doing anything in the ring. But one of the things that we're going to do, Bob, and I'm really looking forward to doing this, we're going to have a 10-bell salute at the show, okay? And we're not going to do 10 bells for each guy. But here's what's scary. I have another list. Where do you hear this one, Bob? This will blow you away. These are the people that worked for Tri-State that have passed on. Okay? And again, no specific order. But this is what's scary. Now, keep in mind, we got out in 91, so we're talking 33 years. Okay?
Yeah.
Kevin Sullivan, who I loved to death, okay, he's obviously passed on. Curry Von Erich died, obviously young age, but he worked one show for me against Jerry Lawler at Temple University, okay? Terry Funk has passed on. Terry was on just almost every major card I had when we got to the Civic Center,
Right.
okay? And his matches with Jerry Lawler and his matches, oh my God. And when we had angles with Austin Idol and what have you, I mean, Terry, God bless him. Chris Adams. People forget about Gentleman Chris Adams, but we actually had him on a card. We had him in a tag match, and he's obviously passed on. Bam Bam Bigelow. Now, Bam Bam was a guy, he lived in North Jersey, and I basically had the same deal with Bam Bam as I did with the others. You're on every one of my cards. He was inexpensive because I didn't have to fly him anywhere. Okay? If you can make it, you're on my card. If you're in Japan, obviously you can't make it. Okay? But that was the deal that I had with Bam Bam Bigelow. Ted Petty, who wrestled under several names, but when he passed on, he was on our cards at Temple. Okay, and he was on some of the battle royals that we had at the Civic Center. The original Sheik, we talked about the original Sheik. He's obviously passed on. And there's a guy, I was so glad to have the opportunity to meet him and talk to him, but he was one scary dude. Okay.
Legit
Really?
scary, yeah.
Oh, my God. Bulldog Brower. Bulldog Brower sold out Madison Square Garden. Yeah.
I remember Bulldog. I remember seeing him in a managerial capacity for one of your shows. That's right.
Yeah. Well,
Waller was there too, yeah.
I had him managing Terry Funk.
Right.
Okay,
right.
And Bulldog, his kid came into the business a little bit, but Bulldog, he's one that contacted me. And I have stories here. The original Sheik called me. He called me. He got my number. I'm not sure who gave him the number. And I said, come on in. I'll put you in somewhere. If you're Bulldog Brown, I was still a fan. Okay.
Of course. Sure.
Oh my God. He sold that Madison Square Garden with Bruno like 9 times. Okay. All right. I'm going to keep going down this with Dr. Death Steve Williams. All right. He ran an angle with me and Buddy Rogers I had a show in Pine Hill, New Jersey. And then on the card that never happened, he was going to be on the card. All right. Anyway, Dr. Death Steve Williams, Buddy Landell. I loved Buddy, and Buddy was a guy, even though he had to fly in, I committed him to every show I've got. In fact, he became one of the TWA champions. Okay. Buddy was just phenomenal. Buddy Rogers. Okay. And unfortunately that match never happened. The last one. And we can talk about that one.
Thanks to you. I had dinner with Buddy Rogers, just the two of us after one of those shows. So I will always be indebted because, come on, Pally, I'm having a burger. One of those deals. And I had a blast. We just sat down and talked about old time wrestling. It was just impromptu. It was awesome. Awesome.
Well, one of the things I'm hoping for at this show on May 3rd is all the old timers that are coming in. And I didn't give you any names of the ones coming in. The old timers coming in, the TWAs. If you come down, we're going to have a WrestleCon in the afternoon. So everybody can get to meet them, pictures, whatever. And then we're going to have the matches at night. Okay. The WrestleCon will be ridiculous. Okay. We're going to have all that we're not bringing in new guys that you never heard of. Okay. We're bringing in the names. And again, I won't go through the names yet, but when you hear the names coming in, this is going to be a phenomenal. I can't wait. Okay. Now I'm going to keep going a little bit long. Luna Vachon.
Oh, yeah.
And I loved Luna. Okay. And I will tell you just a little history. There's a local organization called the ECWA that I used to go to their shows all the time. And I was always in the back and talking to the boys. But one time the promoter came to me and said, you want to work as a manager? And so I became Joel Blackheart instead of Goodhart. Okay. And I took the name Joel Blackheart as a dedication to Luna Vachon because she was the manager of the tag team champions that we had, which were the Blackhearts. Okay. And I can tell you a story about that. That's incredible. Woman passed away, and Woman was obviously married to Kevin Sullivan. And I can actually say this. I am the only promoter in history that on the same card had Woman and Fallen Angel. Nobody else ever did it. And when I asked Kevin and Woman, Nancy, to do that, she tells me that nobody ever asked. They would have done it. So she was in the back. She did Woman in the first half. And in the back, she had to get her hair all up like Fallen Angel. Mm-hmm. It took her 2 hours. But she said to me, and Kevin said it, nobody ever asked. That's the fan in me. I wanted to have, okay, anyway, she passed away. Wahoo McDaniel. All right. I got to tell you one quick story. I'm sorry for getting off on these tangents, but
No, it's fine. Keep going.
one time I had local shows. This was not at the Civic Center, so Bob, you weren't there. It was a Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I had 3 shows. Okay. One was in Westchester. One was in Trenton. Okay. And I'm not even sure where the third one. I remember. But anyway, I had the main event was Wahoo McDaniel against Manny Fernandez. Now, on Friday night, they beat the living shit out of each other. This was, I swear to God to you, I get it. I know it's a work. Oh my God, they killed each other. They gave me everything as a promoter I could ever get. Saturday, we did it again, and they beat I'm telling you, I don't know how they do it. Okay? This was a chop fest. Okay? And at the end of the time, Manny Fernandez had red all over his body. Wahoo was unbelievable. And then on Sunday, we had a Sunday afternoon show, and they did it again. Okay? How those men could beat, I'm right there, could beat the hell out of each other. There was they were stiff as hell. And they did 3 matches in less than 72 hours. Now, I talked to Manny about a month or 2 ago, and I brought it up to him, and he told me that he had done those matches with Wahoo for 2 years.
Yeah.
Okay? I don't know how anybody does that physically. But anyway, Wahoo McDaniel obviously passed away. Bruno Sammartino. All right? Bruno was on my first card at Temple, and I got to know Bruno through my partner at the time, Carmela. Okay? She's the one that got me to Bruno. We had Bruno at our grand opening of the Square Circle when we had the store, and we haven't even talked about that, but Bruno and actually Dominic DiNucci, who's the next one on the list, both of them were at the grand opening. Okay? And of course, they both have passed away. But Bruno, true story with Bruno, this is my first show. Back in the day, I used to do an afternoon show because at Temple University, having a show at night was not the best thing to do. So we did afternoon shows. We did a show, and Bruno had a flight back. He lived in outside Pittsburgh. He had a flight back at like 5 o'clock. And back in that day, you walked up to the plane. You didn't have to go through these TSA lines and whatever. Bruno in the dressing room says this as loud as can be, where all the boys wait for their pay envelopes, okay? Bruno gets up right in front of everybody and says, "Hey, Joel, do me a favor. I need to run. Just mail me my check." When he did that, the word got out. My money's good. If Joel promises Bruno left without getting paid. And that said, it's amazing. Nobody ever asked me for a check again. It was incredible. But anyway, Bruno and Dominic both have passed away. The mighty Igor. Now, he didn't wrestle for the TWA, but the first card that Carmel and I promoted, Dominic DiNucci was the booker. And the main event was Dominic DiNucci against the mighty Igor. I will tell you, they both passed. That match sucked. Okay. But what was amazing is Dominic DiNucci booked the talent, and one of the guys that he put on the undercard wound up being a guy who became Shane Douglas.
There you go.
Okay. Because he trained with him. Superstar Billy Graham. Super never worked for me, except we set up at the Philadelphia Original Sports Bar, the Philadelphia Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame, and Superstar was the first entry. Now, it was my pick. We didn't have a vote to get him, but Superstar flew in from Arizona. We were at the sports bar, and we showed the video that's on YouTube now, but we showed the video when Superstar won the belt against Bruno Sammartino in Baltimore. Okay, so we showed that, and we had his commentary. I wish I would have filmed this. Superstar was phenomenal. Okay, and he was great watching the video. We had a ball with it. Animal and Hawk, the Road Warriors, both. Okay, now they never wrestled for us, but Carmel and I, at that time, Carmel was still in it. We had them do an appearance at the Woodhaven Sports Center, and everybody came to get autographs, pictures, whatever. So they actually worked for us, so Animal and Hawk. Virgil, who just passed away, Virgil worked when at our local shows before he was Virgil. Okay. And we had a tag team of Ebony and Ivory, and he was obviously Ebony. So he worked with us way before he ever became Virgil. Bruiser Brody. Bruiser Brody wrestled at Duel of the Butcher at one of our first shows. And the neat thing with that, the number I'm going to find the receipt somewhere. Those guys broke $2,200 worth of tables and chairs. They destroyed, and I said to them, just do it, do it. Well, they gave me a bill. This was the Sheraton Valley Forge in the area. They gave me a bill for $2,200. This is back in 87, 88, whatever it was.
Right.
Because they broke the tables. It was unbelievable. They destroyed everything. Okay. And I actually spoke to Bruiser's widow, Barbara Goodish, and she was aware of the show. She wasn't aware of the specifics. Okay. But when I told her about the match, she said, oh, Bruiser talked about it for sure. Kamala, the Ugandan giant. Okay. Now, the amazing story with Kamala, I had done an outdoor show at a place around here called the Max Myers Playground. It was outdoors. We put up paper along all the fences so you couldn't see it from the outside. And it was 100 degrees. And Kamala works barefoot. He was in such pain before the matches. He wrestled Ken Patera. Okay. And Ken said, I'm going to give him a match. Kamala just wanted to stand on top of Patera. He couldn't standing on the dance. It was unbelievable. But Kamala worked for me as well. Owen Hart, when he did that match at the Civic Center,
right.
I was the only guy in America that got him before Vince obviously got him. I got him. Okay. And he worked with New Japan. It was a phenomenal match. If you remember that one, Bob.
I do.
At the end of that match, everybody stood up and applauded both.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
We had a couple wags that were screaming blood, but who cared?
No, nobody cared. Right. It was amazing. If you remember, we also had a ring rope break during the match.
That's
right. But they worked around it. That match, I'll tell you, you watch it because it's still on YouTube. You watch it; it's absolutely phenomenal.
That was classic. It's such a great match, and it's the first time I ever saw him with my own eyes. To be honest with you.
Well, I'll tell you, I called him. I got his number. I called him. I told him what I wanted to do. I wanted to work with New Japan, and we'll get something worked out. He didn't hesitate 2 seconds. It's not like he said I had to talk to Stu or I should talk to Brett and figure out what's going on. The one thing that worked for me was I had a really good reputation. I had the reputation of overpaying people, but my checks cleared. Okay, that was a big deal. And I let the guys call their own finishes. I didn't have to tell them. If you think I was going to have Owen Hart and a Japanese wrestler come in and they were going to listen to me as to who goes over, who the hell? I'm not that. That's just not what I do. So they come up with it. And the one thing I will tell you, Bob, most of these guys, and we have a couple more, but most of these guys, they were professionals. Okay. And the one thing you learn about professional wrestling is you don't have to win to be over. And I'll never forget Ric Flair, who I worked with. Ric Flair one time said to me, if you look at the one-loss record, and there's no such thing, but if you look at the one-loss record of the Four Horsemen, they have the worst one-loss record of anybody, but they're over. Okay. And Buddy Landell one time confirmed to me, don't worry about it. Tell me what you want me to do. I'm over. Okay. Just let me have the good match. If you need me to put somebody over, I'll do it. The professionals did it. Okay. A couple more. Ivan Koloff. Okay. Ivan worked for me. He worked against Manny Fernandez at one of the shows, a couple of the shows, but one of the shows at the Civic Center. He passed. Eddie Gilbert. I love Eddie.
Everybody
and boy, did he bust his ass for me. Oh, my God.
Yes.
Okay. Eddie Gilbert, he was another one. He's on every show. He was running over Jerry Lawler down south, and he came up and did my show. Okay. We did that 2 out of 3 fall match, which was unbelievable.
One of the classic, unheard of sequences in the history of any wrestling. Nobody's ever, I don't recall anybody on any federation that did that. The Cactus Jack, Eddie Gilbert triumvirate of hell, to be honest with you. Yep. Unbelievable.
And I'll tell you the story with that show. First of all, that was the worst attended show at the Civic Center that I had. And if you recall, it was 100 degrees outside. It was summer sizzler. It was hot. And quite frankly, I think that's what killed the crowd. Okay. But I called up. Back then, you had regular phones. You didn't have cell phones. So I did a 3-way call with Cactus and with Eddie Gilbert. And in fact, in Cactus's book, I'm in Cactus's book.
Yeah.
I mean, I always kid people. How many people do you know that's ever been on a Wall Street Journal #1 list? And here I am. I'm by name like 13 pages. Anyway, we get started with all this stuff, and I said to them, I have an idea. I want to have a 2 out of 3 fall match on the same card during the show. I don't want 1, 2, 3. Give me some ideas. So they came up with the ideas of the pins counting were in the building match, the stretcher match, and the cage match. Now, the cage match, Eddie even threw a little wrinkle into that because he brought Doug Gilbert with him. I never paid Doug, and nobody in the crowd knew who the hell he was. But we were coming up with an angle that eventually the next time was going to be Eddie Gilbert and Doug Gilbert against Bam Bam Bigelow, because Bam Bam was the other one that ran in, okay? And Cactus. That was going to be a great tag match. Well, it never happened, obviously. But what was scary was he brought Doug in on his own nickel. Now, one thing Cactus still says, even if you talk to him, I paid them as if they did 3 separate matches, so I gave him a triple payday. And Cactus says it was the most money he ever made before he signed the big contract. Okay? Anyway, Eddie Gilbert, after that was Tommy Rogers from the Fantastics.
Oh, yeah.
Okay? We had the Fantastics there, and Tommy obviously passed away. People forget that he was on one of the cards. Iron Mike Sharp was not on the Civic Center cards, but he was on one of my early shows that I had as the TWA, one of the local shows. Bobby Eaton. All right, Bobby passed. Now, Bobby never wrestled for me, but he did a luncheon for me when we were Squared Circle. Okay, and it was Stan Lane and Bobby Eaton and Jim Cornette. Bobby Eaton, I wanted him so, oh my God, I wanted him so bad. He didn't want to come up north. He lived in Huntsville, Alabama, and he wanted to stay home. He just didn't want to come up. So we had Stan Lane, we had Jim Cornette. We had actually Stan Lane and Jim Cornette do a tag match because Bobby wouldn't come up. Gary Hart actually did a luncheon for me, so he technically worked for me, and he did it with the Muda, with Great Muda. And then Chris Candido.
Oh,
Chris started with, he was with Monster Factory, so I can't say he started with me.
Right.
But I actually, believe it or not, when he was with Sonny, I threw Sonny out of my locker room. Okay, we had a show at the Bar Wars, and I could get out. I see Sonny now. Well, I used to see Sonny at all the icons that Rob Feinstein had. We used to kid about it, but I actually threw her out of the locker room. Okay, when he was in one of the battle royals that we had at the Civic Center, she walked him to the door, and then that was it. I didn't want her to come out. Okay, another mistake I made for sure, obviously, because Sonny. Yep. Hey, you do what you do. So when you look at this list of all those names I just said, that's a who's who of wrestling.
Yep.
Okay. And what's scary is every 2 months or so, there's another name that gets added to this thing. So we're going to have a 10-bell salute. By design, all the TWA guys will surround the ring. Bob Ortiz will be in the ring announcing each name. We're going to have 10 bells for the entire group. We can't have 10 bells for each one. We'll be there all night.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Mm-hmm.
It's time that professional wrestling recognize the past, recognize the history. And, if you look at the WWE and all that, these guys don't even know what the hell I'm talking about with half this stuff. Okay. So these are people that passed. The other wrestlers are going to be in attendance. May 3rd is going to be phenomenal. In addition to the matches, hopefully, knock on wood, we're going to have the banner drop because we'll hopefully have 1,000 names. In addition, I'm in the process of writing a book. Okay. And the book is started out with Dan Murphy, and most people know who Dan Murphy is.
Right.
And it's being finished by Scott Teal. All right. And I don't know how many books have been written by both Dan Murphy and Scott Teal, but I got it. We are about 95% of the way done. In fact, this morning I spent 2 hours with Scott. I'm scheduled next Friday for 2 more hours with Scott. And Scott asks a question, and I give him the 20-minute answer. Typical Joel. But the book is going to be released on May 3rd.
Perfect timing. Yeah.
Perfect. It's going. I'm telling you, we're going to people. Now, all I can tell you is the people who come to the show, make sure you bring your credit card or your cash. The WrestleCon that we're going to have in the afternoon, you're going to spend a fortune. Okay. The matches at night, we'll have the gimmicks and all that kind of stuff to get. We're going to have TWA shirts with the TWA, the old logo, and the logo on the back. We wrestle, we brawl, we do it all. Okay, because that's actually the title of my book. Okay, we're going to have the old Squared Circle fan club shirt that used to say, "I'm out of the closet, no longer meek. I'm finally admitting I'm a wrestling freak." Okay, so we're going to have those shirts. We're going to have the books. It's unbelievable. And I happen to know, unfortunately, or fortunately, I happen to know who's going to be there. And I don't want to announce it yet.
Right.
Okay. But I will tell you, as we announce them, you're going to be impressed, of the matches. Some of the matches have never happened before. I'll just leave it at that. Okay. It's going to be TWA style all the way. Okay. Insurance limitations now kind of limit you from the stuff outside the ring. Okay. But trust me when I tell you, Bob, when you come down, I'm not saying if, when you come down.
Yeah, I'm coming. Okay.
When you come down, you're going to say at the end of the night, it's going to be a long day. You're going to say at the end of the night, boy, this was absolutely amazing. And if you want, Bob, when you come down, if you come down early, because people want to see you, they know you, I'll put you at a table at the con.
You got it.
Yeah, I think it'd be great.
Oh yeah, I went to one of the conventions in Philly last year just to hype the. I wasn't even selling it. I just told people the podcast was on, and it worked.
Okay. Well, so I'll tell you, I'll go one better. Why don't you do the podcast live from the con?
I could at least do interviews from there. Sure.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And I know there's Carmela's going to be down there with her. She has my former partner, Carmela. She has a podcast, and she's going to be broadcasting from there or doing taped interviews, whatever.
Right.
We're going to have a lot of that. Now, there's 23 podcasts that I'm going to be scheduled on. You're my third.
Okay.
Okay. Eventually, what we're going to do is get back to all of you with our card.
Right.
And then we're going to have people at the con that are not on the card. Okay. And we've got, I'm telling you, without sounding, I can sound juvenile. I am so friggin' excited about this thing. The problem is I got to wait till May 3rd. All right.
You know what's amazing about this conversation?
Yeah.
The last time I talked to you, we had the same conversation about the show that didn't happen.
Okay.
You were as enthusiastic about that as you are now. You sound the same. You look the same. It's almost like we're in a time capsule now, and it's 91 again, and I'm there to cover what you're doing. And it feels the same way again. And you know what? Great. Because this is why I was doing these things. I was here to have as much fun as you're having. So
I enjoy this. It's fun. It's weird. I made a commitment to myself. This is one and done. I'm not looking to do this. This is now, we just started this about 4 to 6 weeks ago. And by the time May 3rd comes, I'll have 9 months of ridiculousness. Okay. What I do know is I'm going to make this something to remember. So we're making a documentary about the TWA. Okay. There's going to be interviews from all the guys that are still around. And we're going to have video. We're going to also be streaming our show live not video, but we're going to stream it live on the day of the show, May 3rd, and that'll make it international. Okay,
Right.
people who never got to the TWA but have read about it. My luck, and you played a role in this. My luck when I was doing this, because I was in Philadelphia, you were in New York. Bill Apter lives 15 minutes from me.
Right.
George Napolitano was somewhat local. So I had all the magazines at my show. And the one commitment, if you remember, Bob, the one thing I said to all of them was, if you take pictures and you use them in the magazine, I need you to put courtesy of Tri-State Wrestling. Okay? Well, as it turned out, and I didn't realize it then, if you wanted shots of Abdul the Butcher against the Sheik, you had to go to Detroit or go somewhere. It was in Philly. When I had Eddie Gilbert against it, all these guys were now based in Philly for me. So when they came to, like you said, you went to dinner with Buddy Rogers after the show.
Right.
Okay? So one of the things that Bill Apter did, and I love him for this, one of the shows I did at Temple, if you remember, I actually brought out the belt. Okay? And this is on video. And when I had the belts made, I didn't have this metal shit that a lot of these local promotions do that look like they were done in sheet metal shop. This was a legitimate belt. And when I announced it, as I was walking out of the ring, and I stepped down the last step, Bill Apter says to me, Joel, I'm telling you right now, PWI is going to recognize the Tri-State Wrestling Alliance. That gave me all the credibility that I needed. So now when you used to get to PWI, if you recall, that TWA used to be listed with, most hated, most wanted, Tri-State Wrestling Alliance.
I was the guy doing those ratings.
There you go. And I'm telling you, when Bill Apter came up to me and said, right there on the video, he says it, we're recognizing you. It was unbelievable. He gave me instant credibility, and PWI just gave it to me all the way.
Yes, we did.
Okay.
Well,
and
you know why? We believed in what you were doing.
No
to
question.
us who were fans as well as journalists, whatever you want to call us, covering the thing, covering all of wrestling, you came in with, well, a professional product right from the word go. That was the difference. It wasn't just throwing a ring in a CYO somewhere and going at it. You had the gumption to look to the stars a little bit, both figuratively and literally, in bringing in people who weren't in our area a lot. So we wanted to be there.
Yeah, I'll go one better. I'll see if you'll probably remember this. We did a 6-man tag at the Temple University, McGonigal Hall. Okay, and without going, it was DC Drake and Mondo Clean from New York, and Larry Winters and Johnny Hotbody and we had this 6-man tag, and it was pins count anywhere in the building. So I actually had Johnny Hotbody get pinned against the wall, and it was a 1, 2, 3. And stories were going in all the magazines, pins count anywhere. Does that include a wall? Okay. Now, pins count anywhere. Everybody pictured in the stands on the floor. I did a pin against the wall. And it's weird. Nobody else has done that since that I'm aware of. Okay. When you say pins count anywhere, pins count anywhere. All right. The one thing that I always had when I was the promoter, I used to tell people on the radio that if you come to a TWA show at some point in the card, you're on the first row of a match. That's why I like the pins going anywhere outside the building or outside the ring, because if you're on the front row, okay, you're on the front row. But if you're on the 30th row, I want some action. Okay. And today, because of insurance, you can't do that. Those days are gone. When I did, if you remember, I did a show at the Civic Center where I had a lumberjack match with Jerry Lawler and Terry Funk.
Right.
And we had 12 individuals who filled out waiver forms, put their name into a bag.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Didn't they have some weapons too?
Yeah. Well, they didn't have weapons.
Right. But I remember the fan. I was there. Oh,
yeah. You were there.
Yeah.
And we picked out 12 names. Okay. Legitimate shoot, no gimmicks at all. We picked out 12 names. One of the guys that actually got picked is Bob McGee, who has this monster newsletter that goes around. okay? And hopefully he'll come to the show. I know he's in the local area, but I had 12 people, and those 12 we all brought them into the back. And we told them, here's the deal. If Jerry Lawler or Terry Funk come out of the ring, you can throw them back into the ring. But do me a favor, this is in the heat of battle. Just throw them back in the ring. They understand the rules. Okay. Terry Funk went nuts. We had, before the match even started, he went over the fence, went into the crowd to like the fourth or fifth row. There was a guy whose name was Stan. Great guy, great fan, but he knew when to give heat. He was giving Terry heat. Terry almost killed him. Then Terry comes back and they want to throw him in. Oh my God. So if you look at, and again, that's on YouTube. If you look at that match, Terry Funk was an artist.
Yes, he was.
Jerry Lawler was professional. Terry Funk knew how to make a match like that work. Okay? And it was amazing. He would go out of the ring, and of course, he got thrown back in. One time, Jerry Lawler got thrown back in on his head. Okay? These 12, and again, I don't even know who they were. Okay? I don't, except
right, yeah.
Except for
it
this
was legit, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then once the match was over, they were all called into the back, and the match continued a little bit on the outside. But we had some great creativity.
Yes.
And I'm promising that to a certain extent, we're going to have some great creativity at this May 3rd show as well.
Right, right.
Insurance limits a lot of that stuff that we did then, we can't do now. But we're going to be creative. We're going to have some matches that have never been set up before. We're going to have matches with people you want to see, local and also legitimate. I'm not getting 71-year-olds to wrestle. The matches are going to be great. I can only promise at this point. I haven't. Now, the tickets are going to go on sale if anybody cares. October 5th, 2300arena.com, okay, to purchase your tickets. Or you go to the box office. If you're local, you can go to the box office. The box office, if I remember, it's Tuesday to Friday. It's like 10 to 3, some kind of average. Just go online.
They got a website too.
Yep. You go to
2300 Arena. That's right.
Yep. 2300arena.com, and you just purchase your tickets. They'll be posted on October 5th. The place is going to be sold out. I can guarantee it. It's going to be sold out, and it's going to be history in the making. No question about it. All right. And just like we created history 34 years ago, we're creating it in 2025.
Okay. You got it. Now I got to ask you some questions. All right?
Yeah,
I
sure.
need to ask you just a couple of them. I've been all these years. I want to ask you questions. There's stuff I don't know, and there's stuff that I want to say about Tri-State. Here's what separated you from other guys trying a similar thing, like the Herb Abrams, like the Gordon Scazzaris of the era.
Yeah.
The people who were paying out the yin yang for major league talent. When you saw any of those shows, when you attended to, people were paying good money for tickets for the UWF and whatever they called Scazzari's thing. There were never definitive finishes. Double countout, double DQ, draw. And they were all stars between contracts, and it felt like it. Both of those things. With your shows, you didn't have what I used to call fuzzy finishes. The fans always left satisfied. I'm sure that was first and foremost in your mind when you were coming up creatively with how the cards went.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, when I met with the guys in the back, they typically asked me, what do I want? I mean, that's the way they said it. And I said to them, 20 minutes. I just gave them a number, 20 minutes. And if you tell these guys 20 minutes, and 19 minutes and 48 seconds is the finish. They know 20 minutes without looking at a clock. These guys just know. So I told them I need 20 minutes, and I had it posted on the wall, but your third, fourth, fifth, whatever it was. These guys were old school. If you remember, I had a logic. Yeah, I'll say this. I had a logic that most promoters did not have. I wanted my first match to be a super match, because the one thing that bothered me no end was if I had a show starting at 7:30 and you showed up at 7:45. I hated that, okay? And don't ask me why, because I didn't care. They bought the ticket. It doesn't matter. I hated somebody walking in the middle of the first match. So I had a match one time with Stan Lane. Okay, it was the first match. I mean, I had major league first matches. I always said to them in the back, I want you guys coming back. Now, if you can't make it back, then okay, I figured out a finish. If they were coming back, you needed to figure it out. Well, what Herb Abrams never realized was you don't need a double disqualification where nobody wins because you're trying to put somebody over. That kills them.
Right.
Okay? And the guy that gets pinned, if you do it right, is over.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Just because you lost doesn't mean that you can't, you're gone. So, like I said, when we had the 2 out of 3 falls, we actually used that to set up the next match.
Right.
Which never happened, but there was a finish.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? I will tell you, and I'm thinking out loud for a second, I'll bet you I'm going to say I don't remember, I'll say it that way. I don't remember having any match where the guys came to me and said, we're going to have a fuck finish. We're doing a Broadway after 20 minutes, goodbye. Okay? Now, Abdul and Sheik, there was never a pin.
No, but you know what? That wasn't the attraction of that match.
That
anymore.
wasn't
the
the
fans knew it.
attraction.
The fans knew.
Sure.
You know, that's different. They were on a different sphere. They were their own thing. You knew what was going to happen, and you didn't care. You were there for the carnage.
No question. And what was amazing when the match went, well, I'll tell you what, this goes back in history. I love this stuff. If you were ever at Madison Square Garden when Jimmy Snuka jumped off the top of the cage onto Don Morocco, okay, which is on YouTube, most people forget that was after the match was over. The pin already happened, and that's why Snuka did the jump.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing I learned from Snuka is the finish is not the finish. It's the whole package. The minute you walk out and you get your boos or cheers, until the minute you're behind the door, it's the match. Okay? So we did matches that ended cleanly. When Eddie Gilbert and Cactus Jack did their program, there was a clean pin at every one of them.
Mm-hmm.
There was no double disqualification.
Yeah, I mean, there's the difference. You knew the psychology. I don't know how you picked it up, but you knew the psychology.
Yep.
Your job is to sell tickets. Tickets and then once you sell those tickets, you got to send the fans home. At least they may not be happy with every decision, but they're happy knowing that there were clean finishes, knowing that they saw real matches, knowing that they saw the kind of action that they couldn't get anywhere else.
Yeah.
And that to me was the hallmark of TNA, was that you were providing, especially in the East Coast, the type of wrestling card they couldn't get anywhere else.
I'll tell you, one of the classic example is Owen Hart's match. Okay, Izuki comes in from Japan, and Owen pins him.
Right.
Okay, and I didn't have to tell him that. They told me in the back what was going to happen. Okay, again, this goes back to with Terry Funk and Jerry Lawler. There was pins all over the place, and then we ran an angle with Austin Idol coming out. We ran an angle with Eddie Gilbert coming out. I mean, if you think about it, the guys that I had in the building at one time was
yeah, I know.
Unbelievable.
It was crazy. I mean, I remember the old Civic Center, just that staging in the background. You never knew who you're going to bump into behind that curtain. It was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. I went to NWA shows all the time. It wasn't like that because you had people just showing up that weren't even on the show. That was common at your shows.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, and it's unfortunate, but back when we were running shows, the independents had a wealth of talent. And I'm not talking just by the major names. I'm talking about the local guys.
Right.
The DC, I still say this, DC Drake, Larry Winters, Johnny Hotbody, Tony Stetson should sell out every building.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Unfortunately, they didn't have the same press because we didn't have TV, etc. Those guys, and I say this with them here, without them. When I met Johnny Hotbody, I met him at his home in Atlantic City. He thought, he apologized to me for what he did. And I said, are you kidding me? He was a superstar in the making. Tony Stetson taught him everything that he knew. Larry Winters and DC Drake ripped up the East Coast. Okay, now all four of those guys wrestled before I ever got them. All I did was figure out what to do, and these guys just went for it. And it's just, again, if you think back 34 years, and you think back to some of the matches that I had Honky Tonk, I had Rick Rude, those are some of the, okay? When I had Austin Idol, what the hell did anybody in his right mind, me, bring up Austin Idol and pay him? He didn't sell any tickets. Nobody in Philadelphia area knew who the hell he was.
That's absolutely right.
Except the smart marks.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And because I had so many of these, what I call smart marks, they knew who he was. Okay. When I had Dr. Tom Pritchard against Ted Petty, the Cheetah Kid at the time, that match, if you look at its on video, was phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
And I had Pritchard being managed by Paulie Dangerously. Okay. So I had Paulie Dangerously before Todd Gordon used him. I had Eddie Gilbert before Todd Gordon used him. To be honest with you, I had Todd Gordon before Todd Gordon had himself.
Yeah, That's
okay.
Yeah,
you used to sit next to him at the table.
Well, here's the deal. There was one of the TNA shows where Todd and I just started talking. He didn't know who I was, and I wasn't sure who he was, right?
TWA show, not TNA. TWA.
I'm sorry. I keep saying TNA. TWA.
Yeah.
Time has passed, my friend, and I'm old. So it's we just sat in one of those white rooms for a while, and by the time 15 minutes had passed, we realized we were on a similar wrestling wavelength, just like you were. Yeah. I mean, he was into what wasn't around in the same way you were in terms of what you could present. And I got a couple more questions.
Yeah, shoot.
I think it was at one of your shows, and I can't remember the city, and I can't even remember the state. I think this was in Jersey. It was a big venue, and you had Lawler come in, but there was a match, and I'm pretty sure this was TNA because this was the card that Brower was at. Sandman versus JT.
Okay.
Everybody was there to see the stars, but everybody left going that Sandman and JT was the match of the night. Remember that?
I'll tell you this a little story with Sandman and JT. They both trained at Ringmasters Wrestling School. I watched them do matches at the wrestling school. They were as stiff as they could be. I don't know if they were doing it to impress me or to impress Larry Winters, but JT and Sandman was another feud. I could have made gazillion dollars on it. Okay. Todd Gordon used Sandman, used JT. Mm-hmm. The last time I saw JT said to me that he had suffered 11 concussions, and his doctor basically said there can't be a 12th. Now, JT, I've been calling JT for a year with his number that he gave me. And I get voicemail and he doesn't return my phone call. And you'll notice I didn't have JT's name on my list. Mm-hmm. Okay. I've got everybody I want except JT Smith. JT and Sandman was phenomenal.
It was everybody talked about that match. And I'm not talking about us. I'm talking about the people I was surrounded by in the arena. I'm talking about we're driving home. I remember Bill Apter and Andy Rodriguez and myself were all there. And all we talked about, those kids were the best match on the show.
They were
and we're like, what was the name again? I said, I'm pretty sure it was JT. We didn't know who they were.
Yeah.
We didn't know who they were.
And I'll tell you, JT was a phenomenal worker.
Yes, he was.
Sandman knew how to make a crowd work, okay? Right. But when they did matches, Sandman and JT, we had some at the Civic Center. These guys were over. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you what, I find, even in hindsight, which is so amazing to me, all the talent that I had on these shows, if you watch the crowd during the JT Smith Sandman match, during the DC Drake Larry Winters match, during the Johnny Hotbody, the crowd was into it big time. What happened down here in Philadelphia with Tony Stetson and Johnny Hotbody, they were both from South Philly. Everybody in South Philly, you were either a Sandman, you were either a Hotbody or a Stetson. Okay? South Philly bought into that feud ridiculously. They did not know that was a work. Stetson and Hot Body were friends, but they beat oh my God. And we had a night one time at Johnny Hot Body's where we had Buddy Rogers was there, and everybody was wrestling, and it was just unbelievable. We had a ball. But these guys, and again, I'll take it now. This is 34 years later. If you had a card with DC Drake and Larry Winters, Johnny Hot Body and Tony Stetson, JT Smith and Sandman, Glenn Osborne and Jimmy Jannetty, I didn't need to bring talent in. I brought the talent in because I needed to have the names at the top.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Right.
And I kept trying to find the balance. I'm guilty. I overdid it. I didn't need to have 5 main events on a show. But you want to know something? I still say it. 34 years later, we're still talking about them.
Yeah, that's true. There's no question. All right. Here's the 800-pound gorilla in the room. The end.
Yeah.
I want to ask you questions about the end.
Yeah.
Because I haven't talked to you in decades. So let's get to the bottom of this.
No problem. You ask.
Probably everybody in the world knows the answers to questions, but I don't. So you had a press conference for the Rogers-Landell match in Philly. During the day, it was like on a Monday afternoon or something. You remember this? So I show up. I get on the Amtrak and I come out. And, I had to convince Stu Sachs. He said, why do you have to go to this thing? I said, do you want to cover Buddy Rogers making a comeback at age 70, 71? He said, yeah, we do. All right, go ahead. So he set me up there.
Okay.
And I remember, I was in the reporters roundtable. We were asking all the questions. I took photos and we made a big deal out of in our main news section in the back of PWI the next month. We had the picture of the press conference and everything was going great. And I know advanced sales were great. What happened? Okay. Was it just you looked at the books and said, oops, I can't do this anymore?
The advanced sales were not great. That was probably.
They weren't great, really.
No. Now, of all the shows they did at the Civic Center, if that show would have happened, I would have lost $30,000.
Wow.
Okay, unless I had a massive walk-up. I had to make a decision. It was getting to the end. I had brought Todd in. One thing, God bless Todd. Todd, I called him the wallet. Todd had money. So I brought Todd in and gave him a piece of TWA. Bob Ortiz and Lex, his wife, gave me a little bit of money to buy a piece of it. I needed some infusion of cash. I had lost, as it turned out, when I closed up, I was down $168,000. Okay. And back in the day, that was, even that today's real, that was real money back then. I was going to run a show, and a week before the show, it became very clear to me I couldn't pay them. Okay. And the problem is I had the reputation, the checks always cleared. Well, that show, I had it stockpiled for smart marks. That show should have sold out. Okay. And obviously it didn't. So I had to make a decision, and I had a combination of things. The radio show, now look, we didn't talk about the radio show, but wrestling radio was costing me $750 a week.
Right. Everybody, radio for wrestling shows was barter back then, right?
Yeah. Well, and the problem was I was able to sell advertising. And quite frankly, I had a couple advertisers. Todd Gordon was one of them. All right, Todd, that's how I got to be Todd. Todd actually listened to the radio show and called me up and wanted to be advertiser. And if I remember correctly, I sold it for him. It was $75 a week.
Right.
Okay. For 1 minute, I sold him for 6 weeks. So he gave me, I think it was $500, whatever it was. Anyway, the radio show was costing me $750 a week. So even if I broke even at the door, I was out the money that it cost me every week. So I was running that. I didn't have any TV, but I had the radio, and then I had the talent, and I was flying everybody in.
Right.
I mean, in hindsight, I know what I did wrong. Even the match, most of the matches that I had, or most of the shows, I had to fly 10 to 12 people in. Look, I flew Curry Von Erich and Jerry Lawler in from Texas. They had wrestled at the Sportatorium the night before, and I brought them up for my show. If I remember correctly, it was $500-600 for each ticket.
I'm sure.
Okay. Yeah. Then you got to house them, and they got to work for you. So I ran into a situation where I knew it wasn't going to happen.
Right.
So I toyed, and look, I made a mistake. There's no question I should have done this differently, but I made a decision. I had to go off the air. I had to walk away from this business. Once this business gets in you can't. And I have a professional practice. I didn't need this. I didn't need it. So I made a decision about a week before that this show wasn't going to happen. And I decided that January 18th was the last show. And I was going to cut off my phone service the day before on Friday because I didn't want anybody to, once I made the announcement, I knew my phone would go crazy. Well, I had to close up, and all of my dreams and all of my wishes of this card just never happened.
Right.
Okay. And I'll give you one little story. I don't know if
let me interject now.
Yeah.
So I'm at my office, and I don't know how Apter found out about it because nobody could find you, to be honest with you. Your phone was cut off.
Yeah.
So Apter goes, the card's not happening. I said, what? We just ran a thing. He said, the card isn't going on. I'm like, oh, that's too bad. That's all I said. You would not believe, my friend, at the PWI offices, we were getting phone calls from fans. I'll say what happened. Going, they ripped me off. I can't get a refund for my tickets. I don't know where to go. I bought tickets and now I can't use them. What's going on? And they were calling us and we had no answers for them. So I'm getting pissed, right? I'm getting mad. I'm like, what's going on here? Why are the fans calling our offices? And then Arizzi had a show on his radio show, and he had Buddy Rogers on, and Buddy Rogers going, I don't like the way this went down. This was not the way this should be. I'm very disappointed, blah, blah, blah.
Sure.
So that's the last I heard of Joe Goodhart.
Yep.
So am I remembering things wrong, or is this how it kind of shook down? Because I know from my end, I was getting irked because I knew you at that point. And I'm like, it doesn't seem like Joe. Joe wouldn't leave people hanging. Did people finally get restitution for their tickets? That's my question.
So here's what happened. I had a $10,000 bond. Okay. And it was a $10,000 CD. Okay. So they had $10,000. My understanding is that anybody who asked for a refund got it.
Right.
Okay. They had to contact the Pennsylvania State Athletic Commission. They couldn't get it from the Civic Center because the State Athletic Commission held my bond. And they paid out the $10,000. Okay. So now, did everybody get back every penny? I don't know.
I don't know either. That was the gray area there. Nobody really knew. I didn't know what to tell people. So I was in limbo like everybody else was.
Yeah. And again, when I got, now, just to take the story one step further, January 18th of 92, I go out. I do not watch wrestling. To this minute that I'm talking to you, I have yet to see an ECW show.
Okay.
So I didn't watch ECW. I can't stand the WWE, so I didn't watch that. I didn't watch Crockett. I literally walked away, turned my back, went back into my business. I did not talk wrestling with anybody until 2009. It was 17 years when I got a phone call at the office from Mike Tartaglia, who used to wrestle with Mike Bruno. And Mike calls me up and he says he's going to do a show in South Jersey. And would you mind if I use the TWA initials? And I said to him, to be honest with you, it's not like I've registered it. It's not like I haven't used it for 17 years. Go use it. He doesn't tell me that he's going to bury the damn thing. Okay. But he then says to me, this is him talking. I'm doing a show. We're going to have it as a TWA reunion show. We're going to do it at the Flyer Skate Zone. Why don't you come to the show? And I was going back, do I really want to go back? I finally decide to go back. I pull into the parking lot. And if you know me, I'm always an hour early. I pull into the parking lot, and there's everybody rolling their suitcases in. I'm sitting in the car, scared to death. I'm sweating. I'm scared. I really don't want to go in. And I said, you know what? I drove here. I promised Mike I'm going in. I walk in the door. And God bless Larry Winters. Larry Winters meets me at the door, literally gives me a hug. And he says, I'm so glad to see you. Without you, blah, blah, blah. I walk in with Larry, and there's Mike Kahlua. There's Tom Brandy. There's Glenn Osborne. They're all there, okay? And they're all saying, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. They made me feel great. The second time I went to one of those shows, Sonny was there. And Sonny even meets me and says everything is cool. And we actually did a little thing in the ring. but for 17 years, I didn't watch it. And to this day, I still haven't watched an ECW show because if I watch it, it's all my guys.
Yeah.
Okay. It's all my guys. And oh my God, look, I know Sandman did a hell of a show. He was a great show. Rob Van Dam. I can't do it. So even to this day, now, will that ultimately change? I think so. Okay. At some point, I'll watch it. But when I got out of the business back then, I don't know that you could do it any differently. Okay.
Well, here's the deal. I don't think I'll use this term that the boys would have any problem with you. I think the only lingering resentment from the whole wrestling world would be some fans who I never got my refund.
Yeah.
And I don't blame them for that. I can't blame them for that.
I don't blame them at all. Now, the tickets always read no refunds, all this kind of stuff. I think, quite frankly, if the state of Pennsylvania paid it, because they don't have any money left, okay?
Right.
I never got a report from the state of Pennsylvania as to how much was paid out, how many people got paid out, etc. I have met some people at matches who have told me in the last 10 years that they never got their money back.
Well, I think what happened was we heard that too about the athletic commission. So when people were calling, they were calling us. I don't know how they got to Peter, but they were calling. I said, "Here's what you do," or Bill would take the calls. He'd go,
Yeah,
"Call the state, and here's the number, and follow up with them. They're the ones that have the information for you, and you can take it from there." So we did get that information somehow,
yeah.
and
Well,
we were disseminating it to the fans. That's
yeah,
all I really care about was that the fans got it, and then eventually it all died down. But
yeah,
after all these years, I think the only reason people would be disappointed in you is that you had to stop, to be honest with you.
yep. Well, and in hindsight, I did it wrong. There's no, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. If I would have done, I'll use an example. Dennis Caroluzzo, who was
Right.
a promoter in South Jersey, okay, and we were friends. He came to my shows, I went to his shows. Dennis Caroluzzo made more money in the business than I did because he'd have matches and have one main event. Okay, he'd bring one or two guys in, and then he had all his local guys from the Monster Factory because he worked with Larry Sharp. Okay, and guess what? He made money. He'd have 125 people in the gym, and he made him money. I'd have 2,000 people at the Philadelphia Civic Center and break even. I'd have a $35,000 gate, and I'd lose money. Okay, so other promoters, I knew Dennis real well. Other promoters all did it the right way. I did it the wrong way. Now, the fans loved the shows, okay, but I didn't charge them $75 for a ticket when I should have, okay? And again, in hindsight, should I have gone off the air on January 18th and disappeared? No, okay? If I would have just gone on the air and said, look, I'm canceling the show. I need a couple months to regroup. The people would have listened. Now, here's a number for you. They had told me there's something called a Q factor, or a Q rating. And they told me that on WIP on Saturday mornings, I had 29,000 listeners per quarter hour. Yet I only drew 2,000 people to the Civic Center. Okay, with all the radio stuff I did, only 10% of the people listening came to my shows. All right, so I had a bunch of listeners who never paid 3 cents for a ticket.
Right.
All right, now I always say if everybody who listened to me came to my shows, I'd be Vince McMahon.
Oh yeah. You know what? You were email before there was email, because they say if you send out a email blast, as they call it now,
Yeah.
and you get a 3% open rate, you did great.
Yep.
So basically, you were pre-email is what you're doing with your radio show, if you look at it that way.
Yeah. And what happened with it was funny. The radio show, Carmella got out at the right time. I did the radio show, and I got caught up in it. It was amazing how many people wanted my autograph, wanted my picture, that kind of stuff. And God bless, I did it. There was nothing to do that. The radio show was a precursor to TWA.
Right.
Okay. Without the radio show, I'm not sure how we get the word out. I'm trying to recreate the momentum that I had back then.
Right.
Okay. Put together a show that people will want to see. The tickets, like I say, go on sale October, but we're going to announce the matches starting in January. Every 2 weeks, we're going to let somebody know the matches. We're going to try to get, well, let's just say I've got the talent lined up now. I won't tell you the talent, but it's here, okay? And when I look at this, they're all coming to the con, plus they're going to be in the show in some capacity. I'm looking at this, I'm saying, this is going to be fun. Yep, so the tickets will go on sale for the con. The tickets will go on sale for the show. The show is going to happen. Right now, they could call me or call Bay. Bay is actually a contact at this point. But right now, I would say if you want to, here's what I would do. Here's my email address if you want to send me an email, because we don't have a website up for this yet.
Okay.
My website, my company name is Friendly Heart, one word, Friendly Heart Productions, one long word, no spaces. And Friendly Heart is HART.
Okay. At what?
At yahoo.com.
Okay. Now, also another way to probably find out more is the 2300 arena.com website. I'm sure that when tickets go on sale, that's the point of purchase, right?
It will be. It's not up yet. It will be on October 5th.
That's what I mean. Yeah.
You'll be able to go up there and purchase tickets. The front row seats, the second row seats are separate. And then we've got general admission and we have reserve seating.
There you go. Okay.
Okay. So
just the nuts and bolts. So when they get to listen to the show, they know where to go. And
that's fine. I'm telling you, we're prepared to do craziness. We're just not ahead of the curve where you've got a podcast, a website, or whatever. But we're going to have a website up for Friendly Heart, and Friendly Heart's also the publisher of the book, so we'll have more details for the book. But we'll be able to get a website up for friendlyheartproductions.com. But right now, that's my email address. Send it to me. Send me an email. I think Mike Lano, I think you know Mike, right?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So I spoke to Mike 2 days ago. Mike is planning to come in from California.
Wow.
Mike used to come in and photograph all my shows. So he's looking forward to it. So it's going to be old time, Bob. It's going to be old time.
Oh my gosh, I can't wait. It sounds like a blast.
It's going to be fun.
This is great. I mean, I'm all of a sudden I'm going to all these things again for the first time in 34 years. It's like, well, just talking to you, I don't have any gray in my hair when I talk to you. You know, it's like the last time we had a conversation, we were both in our respective primes and everything was looking pretty rosy. And I'm glad that, I'm sorry that you're, I know you've had some health issues in recent years, but I'm glad that you're still kicking. You still got the old cranium working, and you haven't changed, which I find to be pretty delightful. So it's really good to talk to you again.
Well, Bob, I will tell you, I appreciate all of this. First of all, when I was told that I'm doing a podcast with Bob Smith, I'm like a little kid.
I was told this. Yeah, I was very happy to hear that from Bay. He's like, yeah, Joe's all excited about it. I said, I can't believe it. So that it's like, I'm glad you were enthusiastic about this. At least
I picked up where I left off.
Right.
And the fans that come to the show or watch it on streaming services, which we don't have set up yet, but if you come, you're going to see stuff you haven't seen before. You're going to see people you haven't seen before. We're going to have a WrestleCon that you're going to want to be at. If you want autographs and signatures, some of the people there are people that are not normally at these WrestleCons. And I'm calling it WrestleCon because we wrestled. We brawled. We did it all. Okay, we didn't wrestle. Anyway, I'm glad that we set this up. And if I was going to kill a Friday night, I'd do it with Bob Smith any day of the week.
Oh gosh, nothing's changed. I'm old. You know what I mean? I'm old.
It's no problem.
I hope you enjoyed that as much as we enjoyed bringing it to you with Joe Goodhart. What a guy. Hasn't changed a bit. We're both a little grayer, but we haven't changed all that much. And I still got all that hair, too. And so does Joel, thank goodness. So anyway, yeah, we looked a little similar. We had a similar sense of styling back then. Like I said, when the Sheik put his hand on my shoulder, he thought I was Joel. So if you wonder what I looked like back then, well, a couple of long-haired East Coast wrestling guys. Although I had the better mullet, I'm telling you. I had a far better mullet than Joel. Bull too. Stuff to go over. On October 13th, I will proudly be part of the International Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame Day in Albany, New York. where the hall is based at the MVP Arena there. There's going to be a function there. I'm going to have something to do with that function, and you'll find out what that is soon. And I will also be at the gala dinner that evening when the inductees will be heralded. Now, you may be saying, hey, how can I go to this? Because you're going to want to. There's going to be a lot of stars there. So do yourself a favor. It's just this simple. Log on to prowrestlinghall.net for the International Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame. It's just that simple. prowrestlinghall.net. You'll find out who's being inducted, all about the gala dinner we're going to have, all about the special event taking place at the arena that afternoon. It's going to be a whole day of wrestling fun. And there's going to be other events coming up too. You can learn all about it right on that website. Albany's going to be rocking. And I want to meet you. I want to say hello to everybody, wrestlers and fans alike. We're just going to have a wonderful time in Albany. The Outdated Entertainment Hour and the Outdated Wrestling Hour are productions of Bob Smith Podcasts. The Outdated Wrestling Hour is part of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. Write to us, outdatedwrestling@gmail.com. Once again, I stress, if you want to talk straight wrestling and get into a nice conversation, write to me there, outdatedwrestling@gmail.com. If you want to go over something from the past just to talk, I'll be happy to do it, but I can't do it on Facebook. People direct message me on Facebook about, did you see this guy in 1967? I can't do it there anymore. If you'd like to talk wrestling, I'll be happy to do it at outdatedwrestling@gmail.com. Facebook direct messages are for business associates only, please. We also have a website, outdatedwrestlinghour.buzzsprout.com. You can hear every one of our episodes there. You can also hear us on WrestleCopia.com. The main website, the Outdated Wrestling Hour website, newly designed, brand new design motif. Jackson. You can find all the episodes at the click of a button, and there you have it. You can also learn about the Outdated Wrestling Hour fan club, but for a nominal fee. You can take part in some Zoom-style meetings that we do periodically. I'm going to set one up soon for October, and we will meet and greet soon. I usually give away a prize or two, and we just talk wrestling, old, new, in between, sideways. Talk McDonald's versus Burger King, whatever you want to talk about, we're there for you. If, and only if, you're an Outdated Wrestling Hour fan club member. Learn all about it on the website, outdatedwrestlinghour.buzzsprout.com. Find me on Facebook. I'm the only Bob Smith you'll see singing with the one and only BB King. I'm also on Twitter and Threads and Instagram, what have you. I think I'm Outdated Bob at most of them, but I usually just, do little ads on there. But my main jam is Facebook, if you can see Ray Cleater coming aboard. That's it right now. I hope you really enjoyed this rather lengthy, really different show with Joe Goodhart. Something that really was nice to touch base with him again. And I want to be there going to Philadelphia next year for that event. That really sounds like, it's old home week for me, both with TWA and ECW early. I was part of that scene. From the fans to all the wrestlers and referees and, oh gosh, Jim Molyneux and Stevie Wonderful and Tommy Cairo and just go down the list of, Johnny Hotbody, JT Smith, Sandman. What times those were. They really were. They were wonderful times. And if you were around then, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. So anyway, thanks to everybody. I hope to see you all soon. And I hope to hear from you guys. And I hope you come back to the next edition of the Outdated Wrestling Hour. Be here every Friday with a new episode, as far as I can see. Got some great guests coming up. As Ringo Starr always says at the end of his concerts, peace and love, brothers and sisters. Peace and love.